Hey guys, it's James from Fairclough Studios here, and we've been waiting for the Sony A7S III for 5 years, and we've finally got our hands on the spec for it. There's been a lot of hype around this camera. There's been a lot of people kind of wishing it had kind of unbelievable features. We've had the Canon R5, which kind of threw a spanner in the works for a while, people saying they didn't care about the A7S III because they were jumping ship to Canon. But now it's here, I don't think that'll be the case at all. Personally, my kind of shopping list for the features I wanted to see in the A7S III was quite short. I mean, I love the Sony cameras, but I did want to see better colour depth, so I wanted 10-bit, I wanted 422, and it's not just kind of endless spec chasing. I want to be able to match the colours from our film to our photography. Katie edits all our photos, she gets such awesome kind of wonderful hyper-real colours out of our photography, and I really want to match that with the film without it falling apart in the grade. And having 8-bit 420 footage has been a massive limitation on the A7 IIIs. I really enjoy shooting with them. It's not kind of the end of the world, but to be able to match that will just kind of take the production level of our work up another notch, and that's what I'm desperate to get. I also want to shoot 4K across higher frame rates. At the moment I shoot 4K 25p, but if I want to go 60p or 120p or 50 and 100 in the UK, then I've got to go down to HD, and when you cut it together there is a noticeable difference between the HD codec, which is stunning on the A7 III, and the HD one, which is a little weaker. So yeah, that's what I wanted to see. I wanted at least 4K 60 in 10-bit 422. I also wanted a less cluttered menu design and a few tweaks on the body to be able to kind of not knock buttons accidentally, to be able to reach things a little easier. And I have to say, Sony have delivered on everything. They must have been kind of reading all these wild speculation forums and everything. So anyway, that's enough of me wittering on. Let's get on to the actual spec. I've had to write it all down because honestly it's blown my mind. So we wanted 4K 60, but we've actually got 4K 120. And that's in 10-bit 422. 10-bit 422 is actually now available in all resolutions and bit rates and frame rates, and that's just unbelievable, and that is all internal as well. There's no need for external recording at 4K 120 10-bit 422. That's in part due to the new kind of technology in the cards. They're now CF Express Type A cards, which support up to 700 meg write speeds. Considering there are now 600 megabit codecs in the A7S III, it's a really good job they're kind of introducing these new cards, but we'll get to that shortly. So yeah, so we've got 4K 60, we've got 4K 120, all in 10-bit 422, and we've got a host of new codecs as well. Everything's kind of more efficient. They've got rid of all the kind of older codecs, and everything is now XAVC, which I think is in a H.265 wrapper, which makes it a lot more efficient in terms of coding. So for example, the 100 meg 422 10-bit codec means we've got 10-bit 422 colour space in the same amount of data that it's previously taken to shoot in 420 8-bit 25 frames per second on the A7 III. So that's a massive improvement for no more data usage. And for data intensive users like long time shooters like weddings, events, that kind of thing, where you don't want to be kind of using terabytes and terabytes of data, that's absolutely essential to be able to up the quality without kind of upping the data burden on the system when we get back, and that follows through all the way down the chain. And although the cards are going to be more expensive, it's going to make it a lot cheaper in the long run because we're not going to have to keep adding storage and cloud storage and offsite backup. You can also shoot up to 600 megabit codecs. That's the kind of full quality. I think that's in 4K 25p and 60p. yeah, 25 frames a second, and that's giving you the absolute maximum bit rate. So for anything really critical, we'll definitely be using that on commercial projects. Whether we're going to use that on weddings is another story. We're going to have to kind of wait until we get one, play around with all the data rates and see what works for us, see if it's a noticeable difference for our workflow to have to use those really high bitrate codecs. But it's something really exciting that we're going to kind of look forward to using. But if that wasn't enough, it also supports RAW external. And not only does it support RAW external, but the RAW is 16-bit, and that's without any kind of firmware upgrades. That is direct out the box when you get it. And not only does it do 16-bit RAW external out of the box, but it also does it on a full-size HDMI connector. So when an Atomos recorder comes out, which is actually capable of 16-bit RAW, we'll be able to do it with the minimum of hassle and the minimum of kind of micro cables that are prone to bending and everything else, and you know the story with HDMI. So yeah, really looking forward to having RAW capability, especially for commercial projects and things like that. Maybe not for weddings because we'd end up with terabytes of data, but it's really nice to have the option there to be able to do some really high bitrate critical work where we've got control of our lighting all the time and studio stuff. It's going to be awesome for that. So what else have we got? In terms of the body, it's been massively upgraded from the A7S II, and it's also been upgraded from the A7 III. I know the A7 III is only, 3 years old now? But some of the features have been improved upon by the A9 Mark II and the A7R4. That is, the body is very slightly bigger, the buttons are very slightly bigger and in slightly better places. Not only that, but the exposure compensation dial and the mode dial are also now locking, which is a feature I've really missed from my Canon days, because it's so easy to knock the mode dial and the exposure compensation dial on the A7 III that I think that's sorely needed for a run and gun shooter, especially for weddings and events where if you've got a camera hanging off you and the kind of camera's catching your side and changing your settings for you, it's not ideal. So I really like the touches they've put in to do that. The biggest change noticeably to the body is a new vari-angle flip-out LCD screen with a higher resolution. It means it flips out to the side like a GH5, so you can still get kind of top-down waist-level view. It means you can get looking straight up if you've got it overhead, but it also means if you're filming yourself or you're in a position where you have to monitor your camera remotely, say you're running 2 cameras during a wedding ceremony on your own, it means you can flip the LCD to an angle where you can just about see it, so you know it's recording, so you know kind of it's in focus and you've got kind of that view without having to go over to the camera all the time. So if you've got 2 up for speeches, then you can be kind of in control of one and just checking the other, and it's just going to make things so much easier. So that's a real kind of bonus, and also for kind of vlogging and for YouTube videos as well. I know the A7S III is overkill for that, but if you've got it, use it, right? That's going to be a massive bonus. Like at the moment I'm recording on an A7 III and I'm guessing. I have to kind of guess my framing and then run over, do a test shot, go back, adjust, and then kind of get on with it. But that eliminates that. I mean, everyone with kind of a G7X Mark II can do that, so I'm really glad we can do that with the new A7S III. It's a great feature which will be usable for a lot of users in a lot of circumstances. So let's have a look. The sensor is a new stack design. It's 12.1 megapixels, which sounds low by today's standards, but who cares? It means we get a full 4K readout, which means we're going to get the best image quality out of it. And having bigger pixels, because there's less on the sensor, means the low light performance is absolutely nuts. I've seen some examples at 409,600 ISO, and I'd use it. It looks absolutely great. I don't know if I'd use it all the time, but in a pinch, like, honestly, it's remarkable, and I'd really look forward to doing that in really dark venues like winter weddings, winter events, pre-wedding shoots, that kind of thing, where we don't have kind of the flexibility to set up our own lights all the time, that we can just kind of push the ISO know it's going to look great, and it also opens up some creative possibilities that weren't there before, like using little video lights and kind of dotting multiples around like iPhone lights to give kind of a bit of ambience in a dark setting, and when you push the ISO it just looks like super dramatic and moody. It's going to be absolutely great shooting at those high ISOs without getting all the banding and the noise and all the artifacts that come along with it. Even if we shoot up to like 50,000, like, it's going to be an absolute kind of game changer. So what else have we got? We've got no recording limits. That's something I'm really looking forward to. During wedding ceremonies where we're not allowed to move, sometimes it's a bit of a gamble as to whether the camera has stopped recording at the 30 minutes or if we can just make a run for it when no one's looking to kind of reset the recording and start it going again. Having no recording limits gives you unlimited possibilities for remote cameras, and that's just going to be absolutely wonderful. It means we can set up an angle a few minutes before and we're not stressing out about having to start it, because Sony's remote apps are useless and I wouldn't trust them to start the recording, so I always press the button on the camera. That's going to be a game changer for us. Autofocus and touch to focus works in every mode with focus tracking. I've seen a demo of this, and yes, the touch to focus looks amazing. For doing rack focus between focus points is going to be brilliant. Also, giving the example of weddings, for example, if we're static on a tripod and we need to rack focus between two people, you can have your focus tracking one person and then you can touch the focus on the other person and it'll rack focus to them and then track them until you tell it to do something different. That's awesome. That is absolutely fantastic. I'm really looking forward to that. The Ibis. Now, I've been quite jealous of the Fuji X-T4 Ibis, and I've been a big fan of electronic stabilization ever since the GoPro Hero Black 7 that I reviewed a few weeks ago. Now, I love that. It works really well, but the X-T4 suffers from kind of jelly because it's too strong, the stabilization. The new in-body image stabilization, the Ibis, in the A7S III is now 5.5 stops on its own, but you have a mode now called Active IS. What it does is it crops in 10%, but it gives you electronic stabilization. There's no resolution drop. You're still recording in 4K. Or HD if that's your preference, but you're getting a 10% kind of cropped of the field of view, and it uses that in the same way that Warp Stabilizer does, like to move it left, right, up and down a bit if you need to, if you get these micro jitters. For example, if you're filming in a marquee or somewhere with not the solidest of floors, shall we say, on a tripod, someone walks past, it just kind of edges it out a bit, and that's dead annoying. So I'm imagining it'll get rid of wobbles like that really nicely if you use it on a tripod. Who knows, it might work terrible on a tripod, we'll have to see. But yeah, the technologies come from like the ZV-1, the vlogging camera, so I'm really excited to see that in a pro level camera, and I think that's going to make handheld shooting an absolute joy. What else have we got? We've got HLG coming, which we've got in the A7 III. I love HLG, it's all a shoot-in. But now with 10-bit 422, we're going to have a lot more dynamic range, 15 stops of dynamic range. But what I'm really excited about is the S-Cinetone. Now, this is from the FX9 and the Venice cameras, and this is Sony's kind of top pro colour science, and to me it gets it closer to like Canon colours and closer to Blackmagic, and that those oranges are going to be really, really good, because that's been a bit of a downfall. When you're shooting sunsets in HLG3 on the A7 III, it's quite hard sometimes to get those oranges to really pop, but from what I've seen from S-Cinetone on the FX9 and the Venice, it's absolutely stunning. And that is probably the one reason, given my shopping list, this is the one thing I've been blindsided by, and this is probably the number one reason I want to upgrade to the A7S III, to use this S-Cinetone, because the colours are just incredible, and if it follows through from the FX9 colours, I'm going to be absolutely happy. It also means if you're on a commercial production with an FX9 or a Venice and you want a small camera to match, like on a drone or a gimbal, it means the A7S III is going to be a viable B cam for you, which is going to be amazing. So phase detect autofocus, better low light performance, CF Express Type A cards and SD cards. There's dual slots and there's one set of slots for both types of cards, and you can interchange them as well. You can use an SD card in one slot and a CF Express Type A in the other. You need to use CF Express Type A's for the higher bit rates at 600 megabit because SDs just are not fast enough. But for the lower bit rates, SDs are absolutely fine. And like I said, that 100 megabit 4K 10-bit 422 codec is probably where most people are going to sit most of the time. And I think that's kind of going to be fine with the regular SanDisk cards that we already use, but time will tell. Might upgrade to those Sony Tough cards because they look great and they're a bit faster with the UHS too. But not a deal breaker, and I certainly won't be kind of getting the Type A cards right out of the box because I don't see myself using it the first time with those mega high bit rates until I'm used to everything else. We've got a back illuminated exmor sensor with twice the readout speed of a regular sensor and a new processor which makes it 8 times faster. These two things combined means that rolling shutter is effectively eliminated. So pan away to your heart's content like you're on a global shutter. I don't think that's going to be a problem. I also think that's going to kind of eliminate the jelly effects from the electronic stabilization. Again, something I'm really keen to try out and see what the limits are in the real world of that and if it affects the shooting. So yeah, massively upgraded processing. It's got a new passive cooling system to keep it cool. And like I said before, there are no recording limits in any mode. So there's no overheating issues. Of course it's going to get warm, but I can't record for more than half an hour in 4K on my A7 IIIs without kind of them overheating or giving thermal shutdown warnings, and it makes me nervous, so I do stick to 1080p for longer recording times. So to be able to shoot in 4K for longer periods and over an hour, I saw a test done and there were no overheating issues whatsoever. So I'm really excited for that feature, and it's going to be an absolute game changer. Like I said, for remote cameras during wedding filming, it's going to be great. As a solo shooter, it's going to be fantastic. We said the locking dials. Yeah, the only other things are the USB-C as well as USB micro. That also allows power and that also allows Ethernet connection. Now, I quite often use a USB battery pack to power the A7 IIIs, especially when I'm doing time lapses. And it's annoying that I can't also use the USB port for something else, like if I want to tether it to the computer and get those images straight into Lightroom kind of live. So to be able to have 2 USB ports, one for power, one for data, it's going to be fantastic. Yeah, and that's about it. I've probably missed some things out. There's some fancy stuff which I need to really look at, like the frame rate selections not being kind of tied to the codec. So, you know, on the A7 III and the A7R4, where you have to kind of select HD or 4K and then select your codec and bitrate, there's none of that. It's a lot simpler process and it's going to make it much faster to shoot. So I can't wait to get messing around with that and see how that works in reality. And there doesn't look to be any quality degradation with S&Q, the slow and quick mode. I love making time lapses in S&Q mode because it means I can just turn the dial once, have it preset for S&Q, shoot away, and then I'm done. But there is a trade-off on the A7 III in image quality. You know, the kind of raw photography time lapses look so much better than the S&Q, but if it's the difference between doing it and not, I use the S&Q because it's so much easier in terms of shooting and post-processing and takes up less data. So to be able to shoot S&Q in all codecs, all bit rates with no degradation is going to be absolutely phenomenal. I can't wait for that. So overall, A7S III, I don't have to tell you, it has far exceeded my expectations. Like, I was looking at the Canon R5 thinking the A7S III can't possibly match up to that. Then the overheating issues came in and I was like, I'll just see. I don't need 8K, I don't need 6K. I don't think the majority of people will need those resolutions in the next 10 years. 4K is all you need, really. It gives a really nice clean image. Most people have only got 4K monitors, I say only, and 4K TVs, and most of our content gets viewed on computer screens, TVs and phones. 4K delivery is absolutely more than enough for the next 5 years, and I don't want for any resolution. So the A7S III ticks every box for me. It ticks a lot of boxes I didn't even know I needed, and honestly it's going to be our camera body next year. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we've got not many jobs to shoot for the rest of the year. We've got some coming up end of this month and in September. These aren't going to ship until probably the end of September, so it means realistically we'll be lucky to get one in the UK by Christmas. But hopefully by the start of the season next year, when we're starting to shoot in like March, April time, we'll be able to get our hands on one, get some shooting time with it and have some fun. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think of the A7S III spec, if you're going to pre-order one, if you're going to wait, if you're going to wait for some kind of solid footage to come out. Yeah, I've got some more reviews and loads of stuff coming up, so don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell for my notifications so you can see when I post a new video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks guys, see you later.